Joining us today for this edition of your favorite program, 90 Minutes in Africa, which is, of course, your Pan-African show that takes a look at issues affecting the continent of Africa. I am Boh Elvis, had a microphone for presentation with my guest already in the studio. My guest today is Dr. Eyong Ta, who is a consultant and a political analyst, alongside Isidore Parkom, who is a political analyst. We're going to be joined in a moment from now by Elba Samari, who is a journalist, for us to discuss the peace delegation of African leaders to Ukraine to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine in the ongoing war. A delegation, of course, that's going to be that is being led by the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, alongside the president of Zambia, the president of Egypt, the president of Congo, all of them, as well as the president of Uganda. They are supposed to try to do what other leaders around the world have not been able to do. Will the solution come from Africa? And why is it that back home our African leaders are unable to solve problems in their around their nostrils, but very active when it comes to going to Ukraine and Russia to broker peace there? Will it work? That is what we are going to be discussing in today's edition of the program with the analysis of my experts. Dr. Eyong Ta, good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming to the program.
Good afternoon, Elvis, and thanks for inviting me. Greetings to the other members of the panel, and special regards to our televiewers out there and to the African continent, both at home and abroad.
And it appears that each time I invite you, this is your second time of coming to the program. The first time was on Russia and Ukraine, the importation of cereals and grains from Russia and Ukraine. And today, too, it's about Russia and Ukraine.
Yes, you know, the Russia-Ukraine war has led to a lot of, we can call it change of world order. It has given room for many people to understand that present-day warfare is no longer in terms of the size of the country, it's no longer in terms of physical combat, but more in terms of ammunitions and in terms of strategies. It has also come to show that no country is small in the world. It depends on your alliances and in terms of your allies. Because nobody could understand or could believe that up to now, Ukraine will be able to sustain an almost front battle with Russia, which is supposed to be one of the major powers with nuclear weapons and all what it takes. So I think it is a lesson for people to learn that most often your nature of alliances, your type of alliances determine also your nature of security in the world. Because as we speak now, the issue in between Russia and Ukraine has not been limited to that North American countries. It is one of the few conflicts that has affected the whole world. 2 countries out of the many countries in the world having a problem, and it having its tentacles up to the African continent, where we have so much distance between these 2 countries. And before now, we didn't know that Africa had so much dependence between Russia and Ukraine. We usually talked about the major powers, and Russia was the least amongst all of them. So to me, this war is a war that has come to show that after everything, war is a bad thing. Because be it Russia, be it Ukraine, the quantity of damage that they will realize, be it in material or human, will be unreplaceable. And you can understand that if the other countries are coming into it, is because the economy of giant countries like Germany is going down the drain, and the major cause is the war in Ukraine. If you look at France, France is actually confused between whether continuing the fight on the NATO side or take a side within the BRICS, which is the countries a newly formed alliance between Brazil, Russia, India, China. So you see that this particular war is going to create new alliances, and Africa doesn't want to lose the trend as they did with the COVID. You know, Africa wants to find a place where at the end of this, the NATO countries are going to give it respect, Russia is going to give it respect, and the relationship between Africa and Ukraine is going to stay afresh. So to me, there are so many lessons to learn from this war, and we think the African leaders' position or attempt to broker peace is nothing but welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Eyongta Isidong Pakom. Of course, I'm still expecting to come and officially cover your public defense, PhD defense in philosophy. Isidong Pakom is also a regular panelist in this program, 90 Minutes in Africa. Thank you for coming, sir.
The pleasure is mine. It's both an honor to be here, especially meeting Dr. Eyong for the first time. I am honored, especially talk issues regarding the world, like what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, and of course Africa being the front leaders. It is pertinent and of course reasonable and a welcome issue.
And before we continue, maybe Doctor, there might have been a news item across Africa that caught your attention this week, maybe from the death of the opposition leader in Cameroon to other news items across Africa. I don't know whether there was any item which caught your particular attention this week.
Well, you know, personally, most African happenings are not too much a concern to me, because they have little or no lesson to give anybody as far as ameliorating life is concerned. But when it comes to our country, the major concern is that of loss of life. I'm more concerned when somebody departs this world and is somebody that is any person that I think has a major contribution, be it in society or within a family or whichever case it is. And to me, I can only limit myself to Cameroon, since we'll be talking more about Africa, to say that the most touching aspect that happened in Cameroon is nothing else but the death of the national chairman of the Social Democratic Front, John Fru Ndi, whom we join all others here to wish his immediate family and the party our sincere condolences, and hoping that his soul will rest in peace. You know, when they talk about Fru Ndi in Cameroon, nobody can be indifferent. In Africa, they say that when somebody dies, the least you can do is talk about the good things about the person, because the shortcomings of the person are no longer important, owing to the fact that there is an adage that nobody is perfect. And so we can only say that he did he fought a good fight by, you know, doing what was expected of him as an opposition leader. And today, there are many credits that can be put attached to his fight and his party, and where we cannot end up enumerating them. I will just begin, for example, in the Northwest. You know, there was a toll gate at Santa, very famous. When the road got bad, it is John Fru Ndi who took a firm stand and went to that place and dismantled that stop, that toll gate, that they cannot be collecting money when the road is as terrible as it is. The toll gate collection, even in Cameroon today, is the fight of the SDF. We can talk about efforts to ameliorate the electoral process with the changes of organs. You know, the SDF also took part in that fight. You know, when you look at all those aspects, then you can see that we have lost a courageous patriarch. We have lost somebody who sacrificed a lot, you know, to make Cameroon better, you know, even though we too have given him so much, and the party as well. But I think for a single person to carry such a burden is nothing but something we can appreciate, than to look at the weaknesses of the party and the person in question.
Thank you, Doctor. Let Isidong Pakom react on this. The impact of John Fru Ndi, not only for Cameroon, but also across Africa.
Yes.
Before I come back to talk about some other things, and then after that we're going to move to the topic on
yes,
of the
course,
day.
Before I talk about John Fru Ndi, what caught my attention was equally the death of Professor Kengong Kemason, the author of Across the Mongolo. Someone I admire so much, who has equally impacted and at least create enough awareness as far as the literary world is concerned, especially in the University of Yaoundé 1. Before his eminent and emblematic chairman, John Fru Ndi, who passed away days back. And believe me, no one will be indifferent to appreciate the fact that the chairman of the Social Democratic Front, John Fru Ndi, was actually the father of rebirth. I put it rebirth because some people hold that he is the architect of multipartyism and democracy in Cameroon. I say no, because before the 90s, there were multipartyism in southern Cameroon. We have the CPNC of Ndele, we have one Cameroon by Ndel Tomaza, we have KNDB by Foncha. It therefore means that before the 60s, there was multipartyism. Fru Ndi only came up in the 90s to make a kind of what we call a renaissance, a reawakening, or a rebirth. So he's been credited for that at a moment whereby people were actually afraid. Remember when Barrister Yunubak started in Douala, he was being put behind bars. So Fundi courageously came out, mobilized the people, and then set the record clear that Cameroons know that nobody owns Cameroon. We are all Cameroonian, and we should no longer go back to the moment where we talk of one party system. Believe me, Fundi Ndi actually inspired many Africans, opposition leaders. You go to Nigeria, you see before Buhari came to power, there were actually some moments where he borrowed a lot of issues from John Fru Ndi. People don't know about that as far as democracy is concerned. When they go to places like South Africa, Senegal, John Fru Ndi have been going to these places, and most of the leaders there, they talk behind doors. Fru Ndi as a leader in Cameroon might not be well appreciated, but across Africa, believe me, whether I like it or not, he have inspired, and even his demise, people are still looking for someone, because I don't think that there will be somebody to actually courageously fit in to the shoes of John Fru Ndi as he did in the 90s, whereby no Cameroonian could raise up his hand. Remember the Liberty Square in the Bamenda, what we usually call Liberty Square around Tarekon before City Chemics. Police were almost everywhere to block John Fru Ndi to launch the party, but he came out courageously, even around the church premises he was blocked. But then he said, no, this is our country, we must change the fate of this country. Until he met with Biya in 2010 in Bamenda for the first time, he met again in the Bolova for the second time, and he now became a regular person in the Unity Parade during 2010 celebration. It doesn't mean that going to the Unity Parade to feast as a national day was like going to embrace the head of state vision, because he was actually an opposition leader whose vision was clear. But it doesn't mean to this extent that being an opposition leader, we are enemies. Being an opposition means that your ideas are not the best, mine, our ideas are simply different. So that is the way I read John Fru Ndi, even till the way till when he died.
Thank you, Isidore Parkom. This question has always come to mind most of the time here in Africa. Should a poor man run for president? Can we say it is a good idea or bad idea for someone who has a great vision, for someone with beautiful ideas, to run for the position of president of the republic without having money, and is supported by people behind who have money? Is there a risk doing that? Or it is important for us to make money, become a billionaire, before thinking of changing your nation by running for the position of president of the republic? I'm saying this, Dr. Eyong, because I want you to comment on a happening in Zimbabwe where the parliament has approved an increase in fees for those who want to run for the position of president of the republic, meaning from $1,000 to $20,000 for the position of president of the republic. And then there is also an increase for those who want to run for parliamentary positions. But I think we focus more here on running for president. The opposition has been crying foul, saying that this is not fair to say that if you want to run for president of the republic, you should make available a fee of $20,000. Do you think this is a good idea so as to prevent opportunists or beggars from coming to run for the position of president of the republic?
Well, you know, when democracy is a farce in a country, the first thing that you see is that when elections are approaching, those who are in power do everything possible to maneuver and kick out potential candidates who can be a threat. It's not surprising to me that a country like Zimbabwe is adopting such an amendment in its maybe electoral process or whatever it is. But you know, I will stand by the fact that by the time somebody becomes, because if to be a presidential candidate you have to be endorsed by a political party, I will also want to feel that nobody should dare to want to run a political party in the context of Africa when it doesn't have the means to meet up with certain basics of the political party. Because one, a presidential election that has to cover the whole country is very expensive. If you have to move across the country to sell your policies, to sell the manifesto of the party and what you promise your country, you need a lot of resources. In the context of Africa, the system has been made in a way that the majority of the population are poor, so that even when they adhere to a party, their financial support to the party is very minimal, and so it becomes a burden of either the chairman of the party or the national president and a few possible resourceful person. In addition to that, you will notice that in Africa, they have constrained the opposition parties in a way that many prominent business people who can finance opposition parties cannot do so, because if they do, they have put in place a check and balance mechanism with taxes where they can bring them down. It is only in very few countries like Nigeria where you can see, because of the constant rotation at the presidency, where you can see a major party that had ruled become an opposition party, and so those people who had made millions while they were in government, when they become the opposition, they maintain that status. That is why you can see the political parties running a presidential election neck by neck with the same resources, both financial and human. This is not the case in more than 80% of African countries, Zimbabwe not excluded. Don't forget, in Zimbabwe, the former president had been there for so long. Magufuli, the present president Mnangagwa, who came in, was also part of the system. You know, so they understand the dynamics, and they know that if they open up, there are very many dynamic people without financial resources who can mobilize and come to power without much ado. You know, it is also a bit disturbing when you see the fact that in the African context, when it comes to democracy, some of the people who are supposed to be the poor, when they get to certain positions, they make the rich people very uncomfortable. Though the society in Africa is made up of two classes, the poor and the rich. Once a poor man gets to that position, he tries to make things better for the poor, because he left the poverty situation to get to that level. The rich people will not want that to happen, because what happens if he comes and does things the right way, and then the poor people become rich? Then the society will become a different thing, and rigging will come to an end. So those are some of the policies that are in the governance system of most African countries, with very few exceptions, which make it possible that, look, every time presidential elections are coming, you will start hearing certain dynamics, certain changes, which most cases are, first of all, against the constitution, and secondly, they are against newcomers, and thirdly, they are against the majority of the people. So we just want to hope that the opposition parties can try a way to get other support from the local population. Those who belong to those parties can come together, and the few resources that they have, they can merge. Because the truth is that you will hear that maybe 10 parties will go in.
Thank you, Dr.
Against one party, which is always difficult to win.
Thank you, Dr. Ayon. Let's get the perspective of Isidon Parkom.
Yes.
You see, sometimes when you want to be a presidential candidate, most of the time political parties depend on support and contribution from members, and sometimes the contribution does not come. And you know that you can really be a man of integrity, and you really want to work for your people. I'm not trying to defend opposition leaders, but I'm just trying to put across a reality. You're a man of integrity, you want to work for your people, but as time goes on, you discover that you are an opposition leader who might remain as an eternal opposition leader, because every day you keep opposing, and every day the party in power keeps rigging, and you see that you can never win. And at one point in time, you see that, oh, you are a poor man, you have integrity, you are an opposition leader, but you don't have money. And juicy opportunities and juicy proposals start coming in from the party in power. And you look at your family, you come back home, you look at your wife's like, leave the opposition. And you are like, please, I want to be with the people. You look at the people don't contribute. You see? So can we really say that it is very difficult for a poor man, it should not be a good idea for a poor man to run for president?
It is difficult but not impossible. I want to further draw your attention when you talk of integrity to test the ability or the nomenclature of a person who is poor coming to power. Give him the power and see what he can do. You will believe me whether you like it or not. I will further also salute the effort in Zimbabwe, because we in Africa believe that democracy will have 1,000 parties. Let us take the case of Cameroon. How many political parties we have? Have you bothered to read their political manifesto? What are they sending us as an image that can be able to change what is in place to transform the country to what they want it to be? That is the first thing. When they go to bigger countries like the US, how many political parties exist? The Democrats and the Republicans. You come to Cameroon, my country, you see that have more than 200 political parties, and we call it democracy. So to raise the funds from $1,000 to $20,000 is simply to mar those adventurers who are coming in to disturb public arenas. Let the right politicians who want to do the business to transform the society do it. Like Dr. just said,
which gives the impression that some people say that a rich man's idea is always the best because he has money.
The rich man idea is not always the best. Doctor said it all. For you to go into a political gallery, you must be able to ensure that I have these resources, because to run election for the whole country, you must not depend on support. You must also have something before support comes. Support should come in as a result of goodwill, and their manifesto should clearly spell out what the changes you want. If Fru Ndi became famous in Cameroon, well, because he said that power belongs to the people, and that there is a lot of suffering in Cameroon. That toll gate, as Doctor said, to be clear of. How can you be collecting money for toll gate, which is meant for, to repair the road? You are not repairing the road, and you keep on collecting money.
So you see, but he was a modest man. He wasn't a rich man.
He was a modest man whose ideas were were welcome. But you look at in Zimbabwe, as you said, look at the person coming in as opposition. Look at the integrity of the person. Is he coming in as an adventurer or as a political actor who wants change? Some of them want to come in to gain fame in order to grab, because you know in presidential election, once you endorse your candidature, the government give you money to campaign. The government give you money. I was happy when Doctor just mentioned about the poor man and the rich man. He was like trying to analyze what we call a Karl Marx theory of egalitarianism, where the rich people keep the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And now you look at that, it becomes difficult for a poor man to overtake. That is why you are saying here, because the rich man is there and the poor man is here having no resources. It is the role of the government to set a mechanism in place whereby if you want to come to power, you should be able to, at least, we are not saying that be a billionaire, but at least you should be able to have something that can be in your coffer.
But there used to be a fee. The fee was $1,000. $100,000. I would
like you to make another investigation to find out how many political parties are there in Zimbabwe. Because in Cameroon, if we were having two political parties, like in the US, Republicans and Democrats, you will see the election clear. Today you see this one, you see this one. There are so many political parties that they disturb public opinion. You know that you cannot win election. You know that your manifesto is not clean, it's not even honest. Your integrity is not for all day. You are not for all well known in your country, but you want to change the country. When you are not for all change your home. That's the problem.
Let's look at the increase in fee, Doctor, for the parliamentary. At first in Zimbabwe, to be able to run for a parliamentary election, you had to pay $50. But now they have increased the fee to $1,000.
Yes, you know, though that increment has come in, we first have to acknowledge the fact that most of these countries, Zimbabwe in particular, has been going through a lot of economic hardship, very serious economic hardship, and so they certainly have financial crisis in the country, even to maybe manage the elections in question. But when I look at the sum compared to the case of Cameroon, for the presidential election in Cameroon, you know how much they are supposed to give in. It's 30 million, if not mistaken.
It's 30 million, yeah.
It's 30 million. When it comes to, I think, parliamentary, it's about 1 million. For parliamentary and senatorial, it's about 1 million.
It's 1 million.
And so when you look at only those few cases, then you hear what they are asking for presidential election. It is still minimal. And as we rightly said, when you want to go presidential election, you need to print gadgets. You need to make sure that you have representatives all over the nation in terms of polling and all of that. You need to give them money for movements at least. You need to do campaigns we use the media, which we also need some resources. You need vehicles for movements and all of that. You need the sound system. It's a whole mechanism that has to be put in place. So to me, the question with the parties should not be the increment in the fee, but the possibility of raising funds. Most political parties have difficulties in raising funds. Sometimes not because they don't have a good manifesto, but because many people fear to be identified with those political parties for fear of being crushed. You know, in our society, as I said, between the rich and the poor, all of us, I am not a poor person, to be honest, but I'm not rich. But I can meet with all my bills every month with how much I do, you know. But I cannot boast, for example, that I can go in for a presidential election now with my resources alone. That would just be cracking jokes. But if I get into a reasonable political party that has the capacity to mobilize both internal and external resources, just like, for example, somebody like President Cabral Bill did, the Honorable Cabral for his party, you can move mountains. You can move mountains. So when we talk about a poor person not postulating for presidency, we are talking about those who live below the $1,000, let me say the $1,000 per annum, per year, which means that the person earns about 50 to 100,000 francs a month. It will be a suicide for such a person to think about going for a presidential election. I will just take an example if you take the case like the famous Professor Lumumba. Professor Lumumba went in for local elections despite his brilliance and all the the good public talks that he does. He lost the election to a less popular person just because the person could bribe the population, and he still talks about it till today. That sometimes we get confused that in Africa they vote people who do not have ideas, and then those who have ideas.
Which means that the person who has money always has the best idea.
He said, and I quote, he said, they vote people who do not have ideas, but are planning to rule, while those who have ideas are kept aside. And the consequences is where we are. Africa has remained underdeveloped after more than 500 years of existence.
What makes you think that the ideas are the best?
African
the person who has the money can be able to campaign right to the grassroots, where people who do not know him will know that, okay, this man is coming for change.
His focus was not about the person's good ideas.
Okay.
It was on the basis that the person corrupted the voters, and the voters forgot their suffering and fell for the immediate crumbs that they had, which is what happens in many other African countries. When election period comes, people who have been crying that they don't have water, electricity, don't have votes, when they give them bread and sardine and a bottle of beer, that same day they vote, and the next day they get back into complaining. And that is one of the major problems we are suffering in Africa.
That's true.
So we are talking about 90 minutes Africa, and we are saying that the paradigm has to change, where they can notice that if people have ideas, they should give an opportunity to see if they can implement it. Because sometimes the ideas do not necessarily go with the financial means, but you can use ideas and raise money. And I've quoted the example of Cabral, who was just a university worker earning less than 250,000, who was capable of paying the 30,000, the 30 million that was expected, and was still capable of going through campaigns. We can talk about somebody like because if you take the case of like the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that just happened. If you take those who went in for elections, none of them is a millionaire. They are billionaires. Now, be it from Obi, from Atiku, or from the incumbent president, they are billionaires. So funding their parties and going across the country was little or nothing for them. And talking about Nigeria with about 36 states, with about 250 million people, we're talking about.
Okay, Isidore Parkom, don't you think it will be easier for a billionaire to be president of the republic? Because, of course, as a billionaire, you cannot make money. It's difficult to make money if you are not intelligent. I know that it's still possible, but very difficult to make money if you are not intelligent. And then secondly, as a billionaire, he will not be concerned about basic issues. Oh, I've not paid school fees of my children. Oh, I cannot pay electricity bill. Oh, so he will be focused on the nation because he has already put in place a system that is working. And as a billionaire too, he or she already knows how to manage people. Yes. And in case of difficulty, he can remove money from his pocket and handle the situation. Don't you think in that case we should root more for billionaires becoming president?
It depends on the strategy and the mechanism put in place by the billionaire. The first thing is that the billionaire has the advantage to take power because, one, he has the resources. Two, he has the manpower that he can be able to finance and pay to do the campaign work for him. That's the first thing, first advantage of a billionaire. And now, when a billionaire comes to power, or a billionaire, when he comes to power, he knows that I'm satisfied, I'm working for the nation. I know that there are people this way who do not have water, who do not have medical care, and so on. He look for it. But immediately, a poor man who believes that he has the ideas, you know that when you have the ideas, and the only way to market the ideas is on social media, on platform forum, to think that I have ideas. I think there are. But for you to really market your idea, you need to come out and then form that political party that we're talking about. They said, okay, this is my manifesto. This is where I am getting to. I think that, like Doctor said, you earn that popular support like Kabalibi, and you'll be able to raise the fund. The rich man will also go further because he is surrounded by people who equally have ideas like you in the opposition, who think that he does not have ideas. He might be there like a figurehead, but they need a surrounding. There are people, the advisors in both economic, political, and social life. So you have the ideas, you have no means, you think that you can keep people around you. There is nobody, even your wife in the house or your children will not support you when they are in hunger. Nobody should deceive you. So that's just the fact.
Yes, and I would like to add that, you know, we are not saying here that a poor man cannot emerge politically or cannot become a prominent person in society. After all, a good number of those who have become prominent from every indication didn't come up from rich homes.
For sure.
Beginning with our own country, Cameroon. Okay, a good number of them. The bad thing about it is that in Africa that we are talking about, most of the rich people are never satisfied. So if you take a billionaire to be the president, it does not mean that he's going to produce results. We are saying that it is easier for him to come to power. It does not mean that he will be a good leader.
For sure.
Because the majority of them have not proven that. Otherwise,
and sometimes too, Doctor, you also agree with me that it is difficult to trust the integrity of someone when he is poor.
No, it is not really true. The problem is that the poor person.
You said that most of the presidents today, most of them were from poor families.
Yes.
But we see that they don't care about the poor.
They don't care about the poor because they have been in wealth for a very long time, that they have lost their consciences. Secondly, a good number of them are not longer working for the population because they are not even there through legitimacy. Most of the African presidents are illegitimate because the nature which they carry out the election and how they come to power is problematic. That is why when they get there, they decide not to live in the majority. Even when they want to live, they try to play a dynamism in which the person who comes in should be a protege, as they call it more in the French language, in the French, somebody that is going to protect their bad governance interests. You know, so to me, the problem in Africa is that why the two societies have been created between the rich and the poor. The rich have lost a conscience of what they have to do to remain in power through legal and legitimate means, and so they have decided to create unorthodox manners where they use the military, they use the justice system, they use the institutions to rig the election, knowing that if the poor person wants to talk, they can easily crush you. The poor person now who can only work within his own poor people, they have destroyed them in a way that there is fear of being able to fight the rich. That is why they have confiscated the justice system in Africa, be it whichever country, be it in South Africa or whichever country, the justice system has been hijacked on the basis that the rich can always find their way out and then get what they want to get. It is in Africa that you see a situation where those who do not know everything are given responsibility to do everything. Those who do not know everything are given the responsibility to do everything. And the consequence is that we end up with mediocre results. So what we are saying is that there is a need for a new paradigm in Africa in terms of governance, in terms of selection of those to govern, in terms of policy making, and in terms of the African population itself mobilizing in terms of what they want and who they want to do that. Because the resources are there. A poor man can come to power and then use the resources of his or her country and then produce the result. So you don't need to have all the wealth for you to get to power. We need, for example, in those who belong to political parties, they have mechanism to raise money. For example, they have membership cards. They have, I think, monthly contributions or annual contributions. When they have elected officials, the elected officials have some obligations to pay a certain amount of money in the party.
Even the councils.
Okay, be it from councillors to mayors to parliamentarians to senators and so on. Where they have a minister, the rates are different. The rates are different. Then, if the political parties have a possibility to mobilize external resources, that is like most of the parties today in Africa. Right. There are many of our brothers and sisters out there who are ready to finance a good manifesto on the basis that they want their country to be better for them to come back and invest. All these things have been stifled to the point where our brothers out there who have the resources, both human and financial, cannot come back home. They cannot come back home to do any investment. Even within elections, they are not given the possibility to stand as candidates, you know, because of the dual nationality issue. And even where there's dual nationality, there is still a constraint for them to become candidates. So with all this type of management or leadership ways in Africa, the policies in terms of economic, social, and political, we cannot move forward. We cannot move forward. So we think that in our perspective and suggestion, the African population should start looking at possibilities where when somebody says good things and they think the person can be able to deliver, they should mobilize behind the person and contribute.
And that lies in education. Because all what we are discussing here based on class struggle, the rich and the poor. And there is that class conflict between these two groups of people. And the bottom line is this: education. If you educate people well, with that kind of education where they are conscious of what they are supposed to do and what they are not supposed to do, you believe me that some of those poor people will better sacrifice and vote for the right person. But when they are poorly educated, they are hungry. Anybody who brings bread, they take. And the other days pass and they keep on complaining.
Last comment on the issue, last 1 minute on the issue of a poor person becoming president. You know too that when you want to be president, there are people who come in the background with huge sums of money in envelopes and they give you. And if you're a poor man, you have your integrity. They are not giving you the money because they love you so much. They have business interests that they want to protect. If you have people that are in illicit business coming to give you money, they have an interest. Definitely. That when you become president of the republic, you should be able to protect them. If there are people dealing in drugs, pharmaceutical companies, they give you money, they want you to protect their interest. And you don't have money at the time. Only a rich person can stand and say, no, I don't want people dealing in drugs, I'm not going to take your money. But it's difficult for a poor man to refuse, sometimes if the money is very juicy.
That is if the rich man himself is not dealing with the drugs, or is not doing a lot of illegal businesses. Because from every indication, a good number of those persons got their billions illegally, be it those who are in the public service or those who are doing businesses. Otherwise, most of these countries that have this good number of billionaires will not be suffering from inadequate potable water, no electricity, no roads, and all the problems that we know. So it means that those few handful who are billionaires along the line are not really good leaders per se. And there is a difference between having money and being a good leader.
Good.
That is why some of those persons, though they are who they are, their businesses are not managed by them. They are supervisors. Then they take you and I now, the people who have the intellect, the people who have the integrity, and they make you to work for them. You know, what we are trying to say is that we are not discarding.
If we have the intellect and the ability, and we cannot work for ourselves, it means that they are more intelligent than us.
It's a mechanism that has been put in place. We have just, don't forget the aspect of two classes. Okay? You have to fight tooth and nail for you to get to that class, which is not impossible, because many people have done that and we are still capable of doing so. And some of us are going to do that come rain, come shine. I am putting myself as one of them. You know, as I said, I am not at the poor class, neither am I at the rich class, but I am at the middle class. And there is a dichotomy between the rich and the poor. They have dislocated the middle class people. They have dislocated that class where they were supposed to be a chain from the poor to that middle class and then get to the rich class. So we are fighting to break that chain, and that can only happen through good governance. Because when there is good governance, there will be equality, there will be fairness, there will be a meritocracy. And when this happens, you can jump from grass to grace. We have seen that happen. Don't forget, Mr. Boh, you will notice that in Cameroon, for example, most of those who jump from grass to grace, when they got to grace, they decided to make the grass to become a desert. They decided to provoke drought where the grass dried off. Take even the case of Senegal today that people are talking about. You know what the incumbent president used to be when he was in the opposition. We know what he used to say and the slogans and all of the things that he said. He's gotten to power today. We know what is happening to that country in terms of wanting to stay in power.
That comes back to what I was saying, that in that case, it's preferable to trust the poor man than the rich man than trust the poor man.
No, what we are saying is that the rich people are those who maneuvers. You know, in politics, there is what they call the kingmakers. In politics, there is what they call the kingmakers. And the kingmakers, in the majority of the cases, are those who are well-to-do. These are the people who sponsor those who do not have, and that they have seen credibility in them, and they think if they put them at the forefront, they are going to get what they want. So by using those people to get what they want, there is that possibility that the person can come up and then just spread some of the grains to fall. What we are talking about is letting some grains to fall. Because if, for example, you went through a university system where there was free education, you were even given a scholarship and allowances. If you come now up and you see that the population is still at poverty level as you were, without scraping it, you can put the fees at an affordable level and still be able to make the students have some possibility of, equity. And then when they come out of school, they should just be able to have a basic job that can make them to put food on the table, be it in the private sector or in the public sector. But there are many graduates, university graduates, who mean to say, who have gone on retirement without ever working. They ask them to go and do agriculture. When I say go on retirement, it means they got to 35, 40 years without having ever gotten a job that could earn a salary of 100,000. When they ask them to go and do farming work, and people think it is so easy to go and do farming work, you need to have land, a sizable land, of course. You need to have money to do the clearing, to do the planting, to get the seeds, and then you start doing now maybe commercialization before you get to a certain level of. So there is nothing that is easy to get. And what have they done? They have decided to promote what they call the informal sector, where people are considered to be employed because they can go to the market from morning to night and come back with 600 francs in their pocket, where they can live with their Okada, with their motorbikes, they go and come back with 500 francs in their pocket, where they can stand by the roadside and have a kiosk, as they call it, and sell and get 2,000 francs at the end of the month as profit. So they do what they call hand to mouth. And they have decided to say, on va faire comment. They have decided to say, since I can survive, let me watch my children grow.
Thank you.
These are some of the challenges that we are trying to break through to make sure that we get to where other countries in Asia, in Europe, in America have gotten to.
Thank you, Dr. Eyong-Ta. Thank you, Kwacom. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, you're watching your favorite Pan-African show, 90 Minutes in Africa. We're broadcasting from Yaoundé in the Central African sub-region. Today we are talking about African Leaders Peace Mission to Russia and Ukraine, and we were caught up by this topic about an increase in the fee for those who want to be presidential candidates in Zimbabwe. And right now we want to get to the main topic, which is African Leaders Peace Mission to Russia and Ukraine. As you must have heard, the situation in Russia and Ukraine has really affected the entire world. Every country in the world has been affected to the extent that no president in the world can make a speech without attributing his or her failures to the ongoing situation in Russia and Ukraine. Right. Even when sometimes the situation is not linked to that. It's just like the coronavirus that, of course, is no longer a public health emergency. And today we want to understand whether the delegation of African leaders to Russia and Ukraine, to Moscow and Kyiv, are going to be able to bring peace to those two countries. The delegation is led by the president of South Africa, and then we have the president of Zambia, president of Congo, president of Congo, Republic of Congo. You know, we have two Congos, Republic of Congo, which is next door to Cameroon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But we are talking about the president of Congo, Sassou Nguesso, president of Uganda, president of Egypt, president of Senegal, whose country is going through a lot. He's not been able to bring peace, negotiate and peace to his country, but of course he's part of the delegation to bring peace to Russia and Ukraine. Should we trust them? Do they have what it takes to ensure that peace reigns between Russia and Ukraine? And why can't they use the same tactics or mechanism to bring peace to the African countries that have been going through wars and very, very terrible situations without any solution from our African leaders? That is the context of our topic today. Isidore Kwacom.
Yeah, thank you. When I received your topic yesterday, I saw it with a lot of mixed feelings. Mixed feeling in the sense that it shouldn't be a problem to say that Africans are mediating for peace across the globe. It is not only the white man to come and mediate peace in Africa. We as Africans can equally mediate for peace in the white man's land. Why did I say so? We have seen of a prominent Ghanaian politician, Kofi Annan, who did not only mediate in peace in Africa, but in the world at large. It therefore means that African leaders from South Africa, Senegal, Congo, Egypt, they are not only going to Russia and Ukraine for that peace. It's because in politics, you should know that there is no permanent friend, no permanent enemy, but a permanent interest. This is due to the fact that Russia and Ukraine have been the breadbasket of Africa and the world at large. And some African countries are really suffering or feeling the effect or the impact of Russia and Ukraine war. It is but normal for them, due to economic hardship in their respective country, to go and say, well, please, you know, there is a win-win relationship between two of us. We depend on you, you depend on us. But now, can we please mediate for this peace to come, and so that we have what we usually used to have? Can we exchange our commodities as due to the bilateral and multilateral relationship? I think that is what they are going to do. They have the right as human beings. But the problem now comes in where you see in Africa, they all say charity begins at home. They have not cleaned their homes well, but yet they are going out. That is where I believe that the bone of contention why we are here. In Senegal, there is an uprising. Unfortunately or fortunately, the president of Senegal is among the delegation. He has not solved his problem. There is fire in his house, but it's going to quench down fire in the neighbor's house. It is problematic. This comes to tell you that there is a lot of problems in Africa. Even the African Union itself, it has lost all its effectiveness, nearly all its glamour, nearly all its candor. I mean, African Union cannot even solve problems in Africa. African countries cannot even solve their problems. There are problems in Cameroon. There are problems in Senegal. There are problems in Central Africa. There are problems almost everywhere in Africa. But I've not seen these African countries coming as one to say, no, our brotherly countries, they are going through this. Because they don't have a good interest like what they benefit from Russia and Ukraine. So it is not normal for them to go where they think that they have enough protection. Doctor said here from the beginning that it's a problem of alliance. Allied. Who is your alliance? Who is your ally? In terms of this, they are not, in terms of politics, economic and social, I believe that our African leaders are going to Russia and Ukraine to bring peace because of the interest of the country. That is my take about it.
Thank you, Isidore Parkom. Let's look at, the delegation, Zambia, Congo, Uganda, Egypt, Senegal, South Africa. Do you look at this president as really competent enough to be able to represent Africa in such negotiations?
Well, the first thing is that when you look at those presidents, there is a mixture there of a few semi-democrats and some hardened dictators. And so when a dictator goes to talk to a dictator, the approach is different. And somebody like President Putin, we can't call him a Democrat per se in terms of governance strategies, because he goes and comes back at will as president of his country, and the country is just there. We don't know other parties exist, but multipartyism exists, and so on and so forth. So he's a hardliner. He's a hardliner. And so within that delegation, you have a number of hardliners there whose names I will not want to call. Then when it goes to the democratic aspect, I will say the leader of that group stands a better chance of being called a good Democrat. The president of South Africa is President Cyril Ramaphosa, So I think that they are going there, first of all, they are patriots. Most of them there are senior citizens, as we can call them. I don't know who of them there is less than 60. They are even 70 plus. When they go there, they are going to be given some respect in the first place. Before they are going, they have made a series of consultative talks on phone with the two presidents, and these two presidents gave their accord that they are ready to receive them. So they are not going there on a futile mission per se. It will be challenging, but I have a strong feeling that they can broker a deal. They can broker a deal. Because the major problem is that when two people are fighting and they notice that somebody is supporting A, that person loses his credibility of being a mediator. That is why Europe is completely out of it.
But because Europe, they are accused South Africa of supporting Russia, even though at one point South Africa said they were neutral.
Perfect. That's why I wanted to come to it. Because when you take the case of the European Union, for example, and the USA, okay, their position is very clear. Russia, pull back. Or you are a criminal, you are an invader, full stop. So there is no way that any of those countries can talk to Putin, to President Putin, and he even gives a listening ear to whatever you are saying. If you take the case of the Middle East countries, the giant countries, India, for example, China or Korea, they have made their stand clear because of their system of governance and so on. Everybody knows that they are more pro-Russia. There is no way that any of these countries can talk to President Zelensky on the basis of Ukraine and he gives them credible ear, because the West and America are going to tell him not to succumb to that. And then these blocks that we have cited, Russia, Ukraine, the European Union, America, and China, are now seeing Africa as a new scramble ground where everybody wants to penetrate. And these presidents are like some outstanding figures that they know that If they humiliate them or they don't listen to them, they too have a possibility of instigating their peers to take some radical decision as the presidents are already making. Take, for example, the president of Uganda, for example, in terms of his recent outing against LGBT, okay, which is the position that Russia stands for. If such a president meets Putin, their first exchange could be, my man, I'm glad with your position you have taken about what the West want to impose on Africa, because that is my stand too. You got the point.
Yeah.
Because they do those little jokes, you know, and from there what happens? They are already softening the way out for dialogue to take place.
But Putin, too, being very intelligent, he will know too that some of the African leaders are not very independent. Considering, for instance, that the African
not just very intelligent, he knows what it is. It's international diplomacy. He knows everybody who is coming there and whose position is which. He knows already. Don't forget, these are countries that have high degree of spying. Okay, they know even which president there is supported by which Western power or which other. They know all of that. But they are going to look at the sincerity in terms of interest, as Mr. Isidore said. They are going there not just because they want to go and make peace within Ukraine and Russia, it's because they want to go and protect Africa's interests. They want to also secondly go and look if they can give Africa a certain space that Africa deserves in the world. They also want to go and show the world that the African presidents have a sense of focus and that they can bring peace in the world. While those people are the one causing the conflicts in Africa, accepted by our leaders as well. So to me, what they are going to do there is, first of all, a positive thing. You know, sometimes the way we have been groomed in Africa is that type where many people give a better image outside than what they are inside. And so sometimes you could even bring peace easier in your neighbor's house than in your own house. These are truthful facts about Africa. So these African presidents, which in their majority don't have much lessons to give to their peers, find it very difficult to tell their peers that what you are doing is wrong, because they are almost in the same pot and doing the same things. Just imagine, for example, the president of Congo going to tell Comoros. Yes, going to tell maybe another president that democracy is a good thing.
After 40 years,
you know, it will look amazing. You know, so to me, I think that these guys, they have our blessings if they can bring peace in the world. They have our blessing if they can strike a deal between Russia and Ukraine, and that maybe is going to start laying a platform in terms of what they bring back. But that notwithstanding, we will wait to see if they are going to do that based on the fact that they will put Africa's interests at the forefront.
And I'm sorry that I didn't include Comoros. Comoros was part of
the team that is going, and that is another peaceful country as well.
Exactly,
it's another peaceful country that can.
Thank you, Doctor. Let me just collaborate with what you said, that it will be history if African leaders actually mediate and bring peace in Russia and Ukraine, where the Western power has failed in their own house. And now you believe in me that in the times where Afghanistan and Iraq were in civil war with the US, it was Kofi Annan who penetrated and actually softened the minds of the George Bush at that time. So it doesn't mean that African have no place in the world. They actually have their place. So we will go down in the annals of history that the black man goes to the white man land and mediate to bring peace, just like the white man used to come to Africa when they are creating conflict. They come back again to solve the problem themselves. So I think that this is history in the making, and I believe that in the nearest future, I am prophesying that Africa in the nearest future might be the world leader, despite their technological power, but based on their resources and the economic and academic growth that we find in Africa, because it's very difficult now to cheat an African. They know the reality, but they fear what they are not supposed to be afraid of.
Let's listen to, this is what Senegalese president said very clearly. He said, we don't want to be aligned on this conflict. Very clearly, we want peace. That's the African position from Macky Sall.
Yes, he may be right. He may be right, but you know, most often what presidents or diplomats say in public should not be taken for the gospel. We must always analyze it with a pinch of salt, because they must always say what the public wants to hear. And just as I said, there is no way that President Macky Sall can convince anybody that he doesn't have more attachment to France. But look at it again, you will see that even though France is a member of the European Union and an ally to the US, France has been very careful in its involvement in this conflict. And it is even alleged that the French president has given notified interest wanting to participate in the BRICS. the BRICS summit that is being prepared to hold in South Africa. The present French president is already campaigning if he could be a guest to that meeting. What is the interest? It's because they know the power of BRICS and what they are coming up for. These are we can call them newly industrialized countries. Russia is an old industrialized country, but the other ones are newly industrialized countries that are growing very powerfully in technology, and they are penetrating several markets in the world. And so they have noticed that there will be no reason for the continuous fighting without coming to a certain middle point. Don't forget, even when the European Union sanctioned Russia in terms of petroleum products, some companies in those countries were still dealing with Russia in terms of gas. Companies in Britain, companies in Germany, they were still buying gas from Russia because that was the only way for them to survive. So it means that the economic sanctions that were given on Russia were given with a lot of limitation, knowing that they had already had too many links with Russia economically that could not be foiled. Again, when you look at some of these countries that are going to negotiate or to mediate, these are countries that have a lot of cereal consumption as a basic foodstuff.
Like Senegal.
Like the maize, like wheat, like the sunflower, which are products from Ukraine in particular. And so I think that they have had a lot of difficulties having the supply of this foodstuff. And they think that because I remember in the early part of the conflict when things got so bad, they had to negotiate with Russia for some quantity of, because they were already stockpiled at the seaports and were getting bad in Ukraine. They had to negotiate, and they allowed a certain quantity to be released to the African destination. It was precise that they are releasing this quantity to go to Africa. So that is already the fact that Ukraine and Russia fighting war knew that Africa is not party to what is happening there, and so if they could assist Africa, they could. And so if they had shown that good faith towards Africa, it was also Africa's position to see that if these two friends are still fighting up to now, can we not try to see if we can talk to our friends who are the two presidents to see how they can arrive at a consensus and let peace reign?
And while in Kiev, which is in Ukraine, of course, the Russian president Vladimir Putin was aware that an African delegation is coming, and they had to make a stopover at Kiev before they will move over to Moscow, maybe and meet Putin. But it did not stop Vladimir Putin from, from implementing air raids. They were welcome in Kiev by air raids. Can we see here any some sort of sincerity from the part of Vladimir Putin?
I think that there is a lot of sincerity in the part of Putin, though in diplomacy we don't say truly it is sincerity, because at one moment they take precautions in terms of diplomacy. Receiving them at the level of Kiev, Putin simply took measures.
Okay, while in Kiev, Putin knows that they are in Kiev. They know that they're there very soon, and then just all of a sudden we see air raids around there.
Yeah, which means that there are a lot of mechanism for him to accept, because before these leaders even live here, they were already informed. They already have their credentials. They already have all the information that they need to discuss. And now, living here for them to be received at Kiev before they arrived there, Putin was well conscious of the fact that this is what was to be discussed before moving over to meet Putin. So I think that at this level, I am really seeing that the war in Russia and Ukraine will come to an end based on the effort that will be put in by the African leaders. Believe me that Russia and Ukraine are equally tired. They are fed up with the war, and they don't want to give in to each other. They don't want this Western power to join them to make as if they are the one bringing peace, because no Western power come to mediate for peace without asking for something. So they prefer the African brothers, because Africa is a free land. And when Africa, they take more from the West or from the Russia and Ukraine, because it's a trading partner. So I believe that these our leaders will succeed in this mission, and I believe that Africa is going to be an Eldorado of peace in the nearest future, and Africa is going to show a new example, a new dynamism in the world, in this Russia and Ukraine war.
Let's read this excerpt from the Moscow Times, saying that a delegation, that is, a barrage of Russian missiles greeted a delegation of African leaders arriving in Kiev on Friday as part of a mission aiming to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. The high-level team hopes to bring peace to the table, the voice of a continent that has badly suffered from repercussions of the Ukraine war, including by rising grain prices. Shortly after the arrival in the Kiev region was announced, air raid sirens sounded in the capital and across the country as Russian missiles were detected. Can we say in diplomacy, Putin was trying to pass across a message to the African leaders?
There is always this probability where we say that some people try to judge what they don't know about. And even though we have social media today and media outlets that can give updates on happenings, there are a lot of manipulations. So sometimes in incidents like that, it is to give a clear message on the gravity of the situation. Because don't forget, these are targeted missiles and they knew what they were doing. There is no way that they could harm any president that is on mission there. So, when there is war, you have to be on alert until the peace deal is broke out. And whenever a delegation is coming, that is when people find all the possibilities to amplify the situation. Take even in the case of our Cameroon context. Whenever there is an announcement of a delegation going to West Cameroon or to the Southwest and Northwest regions, you always see that the armed groups look for a possibility to intensify the situation.
Like what happened with the PM in Northwest?
In order to give the true picture of what is happening. Oh, so I used to hear that there are gunshots. Truly, that is a gunshot. I used to hear that they throw missiles, so truly the missiles are real. Because the visit will not just be limited to the presidency of with President Zelensky. They will have to take a look to see the gravity of the situation.
That's why they went to Bucha. They also went to Bucha, one of the key areas.
One of the key areas. They will have to take a look to see the gravity of the situation and why even the foodstuff exportation had to take a suspension. At the same time, when they go to Russia, when they will be going to, don't be surprised that Kiev, Zelensky may also do a sort of some
drama,
to also show the gravity of the situation. So to me, it is not strange that the war is still going on, even when a delegation has gone to find a way out. Because if they went and noticed nothing, it would be like, but what are they talking about? So I think that is the message that they are passing across. All what we are saying is that we just want to hope that they will use the African wisdom and be able to strike a deal that will be beneficial to Africa in particular. Don't forget to end up, please.
Okay.
When the First World War and the Second World War took place, Africa did not cause the war. But at the end of it, many places in Africa became the battleground. And the greatest destruction happened in Africa without reparations, contrary to the other countries in Europe and Asia where reparations were big. For example, Japan became a major power because of the war. After the reparations, Germany became a great power because of the reparations after the war. I don't still remember any African country that emerged after the First or Second World War because of reparations that were done. So this time around, we want to be careful if possible.
Isidore, does this give the impression that when it comes to hunger, the real potentials of people can really be shown? I am saying this because we know, as Doctor was saying in his analysis, African leaders still have their interests. They want to facilitate the importation of wheat and other raw materials from Russia and Ukraine, which could have an impact in the day-to-day life of Africans and which could even lead to uprisings. You know how the price of bread sometimes could lead to an uprising in a country.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, at the same time, many Africans are dying every day in African countries that are not even far from the countries that are representing them in Russia and Ukraine, but they seem to be doing nothing about it. This means, I don't want to believe that this means that they don't have interest about what is happening in their continent.
I think that Africans have actually failed in one way. It is due to hunger that are rushing to Russia and Ukraine, because if they have all that it takes, I don't think that they'll be going to Russia and Ukraine. Remember, I said here in politics, no permanent friend, no permanent enemy, but permanent interest. They're going to Russia is to protect their interest, which is that hunger that driving them to go and protect. The failure of Africans is coming as a result of the fact that we have all the resources that it takes. Why don't we?
When you say they are going to Russia and Ukraine because of hunger, what do you mean?
Hunger. It is hunger. The price of petrol cannot rise up because of what? It rose up because of the war in Russia and Ukraine. I was in CRTV to analyze that. I am telling you that if the basic price of basic commodity increase in Africa, it's because of this war. And all the Minister of Economy in Cameroon justified that. The Minister of the President of Senegal justified that. That why price of basic commodity are increasing is because of the war in Russia and Ukraine. We mean that hunger have taken African leaders to Russia and Ukraine. Because if there is no peace in Russia and Ukraine, they will die of starvation. Their failure is coming from the fact that they have the resources. We Africans have the resources, but we are unable to develop it. If Senegal is a desert and Cameroon is an Eldorado with fertile land, why is it that Senegal cannot say, Cameroon, my brother, increase your production, give it to me or market it to me? Why is it that Cameroon cannot increase its productivity to market to African countries? Must we only trade with the West? It is true that we cannot do without the white man. It is true that the white man cannot also do without us. Let us consume our product. Let us produce and consume our own. In the year 2010, it was analyzed that more than 20,000 tons of rice were imported to Cameroon. And I asked myself, what is happening with the Ndob rice? What is happening with the bull rice? What is happening with rice in Magaga in the north? Why can't we develop these sectors and stop importation? Because when these sectors are developed, our children will be employed and we will not have any reason to import. We will rather be marketing out. African leaders have failed because of embezzlement, corruption. Take any African minister or president. You see that most of the president and minister, they are more richer than businessmen. Most civil servants in Africa, they are richer than businessmen because they believe that when they go to power, it's a place to embezzle, it's a place to steal. Most head of state in Africa and minister are thieves. Let me put that way. It is clear that they are thieves. There is no poor president in Africa. They are richer than some of the Western head of state. Why can we not develop our own agricultural sector? We have petrol here in Sonara. Having been refined, Sonara was created in 1966 and by 1976. By 1976, we were inaugurated. Inaugurated to meet our domestic demand. Have Sonara ever met our domestic demand? If you go to my area in Menchum, you will realize that the price of petrol that is sold here in Yaoundé, the petrol that is taken around Sam, the one that is taken to Douala port in Besenge, is not the same price that they are selling in Womb. Because price in petrol in Womb should be about 1,000 francs. Why? Because the depot is far away from the people. People buy and take it to far away places to go and consume. A buy rather can buy petrol here to take it to a very distant place. And do you think that you buy and carry to go and sell for 650 or 750? No. It is because of embezzlement and corruption. We have thieves in the name of leaders.
Thank you, Isidore Parkov. You know why I'm laughing? Because he's using the word that most of African leaders are thieves. And it also brings me to this issue too, which is just an aside, about how money can make the difference. You see, it's very, very easy for people here in Africa to arrest someone, mob justice, to pick up someone because he stole food, or he stole a liter of oil, or he stole a goat or chicken, and kill the person, and then refer to the person as a thief. But at the same time, when you are a minister or a senior official, you are not a thief, you are an embezzler, and the word seems very, very good to pronounce in the mouth, but doctor, that is not the issue I wanted to comment about. I wanted to talk about some of the crises we have in Africa that deserve the intervention of African leaders. Maybe they are not aware, they must have forgotten, and they are focused on Russia and Ukraine. But I think that while there, you might want to remind them about some of the conflicts in Africa which necessitate the intervention of our African leaders.
Yes, before I go to that, I would like to say that the picture is not completely blurred, because as we always say, the problem is that it is below 50%. Because to say that the African leaders have never tried to resolve problems of the continent would be an overstatement. Yeah. If you remember the case of countries like Liberia, like Sierra Leone, the Gambia, they gained back their integrity because of peers of the African continent. When Sierra Leone and Liberia were in the hot civil war, it is the sub-region under the ECOWAS that had to come in forcefully with the leadership of Nigeria through the military arm of the ECOWAS that they call the ECOMOC. That is what actually brought peace to Sierra Leone and Liberia, and today there is that relative calm in those two countries. Gambia was almost going to enter into a civil war with the former President Yahya Jammeh refusing to quit power. It is the ECOWAS that obliged him to leave after they threatened him that they were going to enter the country and remove him by force if he didn't quit power. And then, if you look at the case of the Central African Republic, though it is not yet complete, it is some peers of the sub-region that tried to mediate in the process, though they couldn't meet with the armed groups per se in terms of coming out with a complete deal. If you also look at the case of Angola, it was also friendly countries that also came into the picture to bring some peace. Not leaving out the case of the Democratic Republic of Congo Zaire, where though the peace has not yet returned, but some African presidents have made efforts to try to broker a deal so that peace can return there. You know, the major problem here, as we have said, is that in the beginning I said, if you take the case of the Central African Republic, one of the major problems is that all those who go there to intervene don't do so in good faith. They don't do so in good faith because if you take the case of the Central African Republic, the former president, when he was leaving, before the present one came to power, he made a stop through Yaoundé before he took off, which means that Yaoundé knew that the country was already off hands and they did not do much to that effect. When the former president, the president before the late president of, the recent late president of Chad was overthrown from power, he made a stop in Yaoundé before he took off to exile wherever he went to. And then we can also see that when most of the presidents quit power informally, being chased out, they easily find solace in the neighboring country of another African country president. This is just to tell you that they themselves are each other's keeper. You remember I've told people time again that the African Union, for example, is a club. It's not a union as people say. It's not a union intended to do things for Africa, policies, economic. No, it is a club of presidents that come to discuss with each other on how to stay in power, on how to manipulate their people, and on how to protect their interests in relation to the big powers. So the African presidents cannot easily resolve the problems within Africa because none of them is an example to another. None of them can easily go and tell the other one that stop killing your people because the people are those who brought you to power.
What about you? The
other one will ask you that, what about you?
That's true.
There are very few who can tell the other one that quit power because you have stayed too long or you came to power. Look at it every time when the elections come up. No president in Africa tells the other one that you cheated to be president. Nobody says anything about that. Not even the African Union. First of all, the African Union doesn't operate as a union. They are funded by the European Union. They are funded by the Chinese government. They are funded by the American government. And even when they want to carry out projects, it is these countries that we're talking about that provide the funding. So there is that problem of the African countries not being able to solve their own problem on the basis that it is impossible for any of them to be a lesson giver to any other. And since they operate within the same paradigm of bad governance, within the same paradigm of corruption, within the same paradigm of the poor and the rich, within the same paradigm of not having the people at the center of things, and without forgetting mysticism. Most of the people operate without they themselves being the decision makers of most of the decisions they take. So with all these things put in place, it has made it so challenging for the African leaders in particular, to be able to resolve the problems within. Take the case of Nigeria, for example. Nigeria has so many problems. The Boko Haram is there. You have the Niger Delta forces, the Biafran organization that is claiming secession. There is no African president that has ever mentioned a statement about the instability in Nigeria, forgetting to know that if Nigeria gets destabilized, more than 20 African countries will go down. More than, I repeat,
West and Central Africa.
A good number of West African countries, including the Central African countries, will go down. The Boko Haram conflict that is going on, look at it very well. It has been limited to the countries that are immediately affected with the mixed military commission that they created. And when that happened, look at it well, who came to rescue them or to support them? It was the USA that came first with military intelligence that were located in Garoua, 300 of them, to provide military intelligence. Who provided ammunition in its good quantity? France was one of those who provided ammunitions for them to be able to fight the fight. How many African countries that are not within that area made a statement even financially? None. Take the case of which country, when they had Cameroon had a problem, and the African countries, Cameroon, they promised, the Central African country promised to provide the Boko Haram, the Boko Haram aspect, when Cameroon, the Amambia was involved, and Chad, the Central African sub-regional country promised to support with 50 billion in one of their summits. 50 billion francs to support Cameroon and Chad for them to be able to continue the fight. As we speak, I don't know if they ever raise up to 20 billion. That these are countries, independent countries, that can decide to raise 10 billion or 5 billion to support a brother country. That was Cameroon and Chad suffering very heavily. 50 billion francs was above them to contribute. So these are just some examples of the case. We should not even forget the case of Libya, when Libya was being attacked, and all the African heads of state knew why President Gaddafi was going to be taken out. The only country that spoke was South Africa. Only country that spoke openly against it was South Africa. When he was killed, then the others started saying that they are sending condolence messages to the country. The country was torn apart, and today we know that Libya is a no man's land. So these are just some few examples of problems in Africa that actually needs the so when they go to the African summit, African Union summit, you ask yourself, what do they discuss? You ask yourself, what resolution do they take? They don't have economic power. If they want to take any decision to go, and they don't have the money, they don't even have the resources. If they go to do that, they don't have a standing military. If they have a standing military that they can constitute, because the human resources there, they will not have the equipment. They will not even have the funding to withstand that. In Central Africa, for example, it is the United Nations that is there and has not been able to bring peace in a small Central African country. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zaire, that we talked about here, the United Nations have been there for more than 20 years. They have not been able to bring peace in the northern part of the country, the Kivu area, where there is a continuous problem. In the case of Rwanda, where they succeeded, the United Nations, it was not even the United Nations that succeeded to bring the peace deal, because while they were there, they did not take part in any activity. It is because the rebels succeeded to defeat the government in power, that is the present president. His rebellious group succeeded to defeat the government in power, and when they took over, they decided to bring the crisis to a stop, the armed conflict to a stop. In the case of Nigeria during the Biafra War, no African country intervened. It was just the fact that the Nigerian government succeeded to win the Biafrans, and so that is why even in Cameroon today we are having an armed conflict. Look at it very well. No African president has made a statement or a strong action that has to do with bringing down the peace. Even when the ambassador speak, it ends there. Because I remember at the early period, the Gabonese ambassador was the eldest member in the diplomats in Africa, spoke at the Unity Party, and we thought after that was going to be a follow-up. It ended with the speech. So to me, there are too many problems in Africa that the African presidents are ignoring, not because they don't know that it exists, but because they don't have any powers to solve them.
And before you go, let me just add on to what Doctor said. The UN, I'm not saying UN succeeded in any mission in Africa, except when one party dominated the other, either the ruling party or the opposition party or the rebels. If you say they stay in Central Africa or in Congo for over 20 years, please believe me that they are not there to mediate peace. They are there to loot. They are there to gather out resources for the aggrandizement of their countries. They are not there to mediate, to bring peace. Because you cannot tell me that a small country in Central Africa, which is not up to 25 million people, and then you stay there for more than 20 years. What are you doing to mediate peace for 20 years? It is for that interest of minerals, resources that they are looting to aggrandize their metropolitan countries. That is just the basic truth.
Maybe that's an opinion, because we might not really have facts.
I'm saying that
to prove that they
I'm
are
not saying
doing that.
where the European Union or the UN have succeeded in Africa. Why is it that all their missions are failed?
Okay. I think, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, you're watching 90 Minutes in Africa, and we are taking a look at the African leaders' peace mission to Russia and Ukraine. We want to understand whether you think they are going to succeed. Please, you can send your own views, you can send your own opinion about this topic by sending us an SMS or a message on WhatsApp using the number you find on your screen right there. Dr. Eyongta, if the African leaders' mission to Ukraine and Russia succeeds, what do you think is going to be the impact for our continent and for our leadership? How will the world view Africa if we succeed in this mission?
Well, you know, the world already sees African leaders as cowards. That is the picture that I have for them. They know that they are cowards because all of them know what the African leaders are afraid of and why they cannot take very strong decisions for their people and against invaders, in quote. And so if they see this happens and the African leaders who go there actually succeed as we are praying they do, it may start giving them a different picture of the courage that they have taken. Because don't forget, for them to go there, as they said, they wanted to play a non-alignment situation. And the non-alignment would mean sacrificing a lot of things, which to me, a good number of those countries there have not been playing a non-alignment role before the crisis. Because whether it is South Africa, whether it is Uganda, whether it is Egypt, we know which powers they are attached to as friends or as allies. It's going to give room again for Africa to have a stronger tie with Russia, which is going to increase their links with the BRICS, which, as I've said, in the next 10 years are going to turn the tables around in terms of the world status. So by doing this, it's going to put Africa in a better position to negotiate when the rightful time comes in that respect. Equally, Africa is already fighting to enter the Security Council because Africa has a temporal seat that is not a decision maker or does not have a veto power. And that has been one of the cries of many Pan-Africanists, that if Africa does not have a veto power, then they will keep deciding for Africa. And as somebody said, if you are not on the table, you may end up being the menu on that table. So Africa is struggling to stop being a menu on the table of decision making. They rather want to be part of the decision makers, and these are some of the steps that they can take that can give that power, that can give them that stamina, that can give them all what it takes to fight entering into the Security Council, which to me is the superior arm of the United Nations and the decision making power in the world.
Isidore, this means that the United Nations also needs to sit up. I saw that in your last statement you were very, you're not happy with the fact that their peace missions in Africa do not succeed most of the time. This means that they also have to sit up, because we will not understand why the United Nations will be unable to solve a matter, and then to the extent that we'll have to depend on African leaders to solve the situation.
Yeah, I think that the UN has failed woefully in all aspects as far as Africa is concerned. I have not seen any country in Africa where the UN have actually succeeded to mediate and bring peace. So to this effect, I think that the UN is just like a kind of a club of barons who sit around the table and then discuss pertinent issues with their personal interests.
But I must say that if it is about statements too, we should acknowledge the fact that the United Nations and the African Unions, they really write and they roll out lots of statements. I don't know whether those statements they don't have an impact, because we see that each time there's something, they come up with statements, strong statements, condemning in very strong terms, calling for restraint.
If I sit in this table and tell my child, stop stealing, what have I done to stop that child from stealing, apart from those words saying that will beat you without beating you? What have I done? If they get done back in without any impact. So let me just come back to what we were discussing. I think that we want to go to the issues of the UN. You ask yourself if we actually have a win-win relationship with the UN, if we are actually members, or they are just taking us like their playing ground, their battleground. Doctor said here that in the First World War, it was not the cause of Africa. Yes, when the First World War broke out in 1914, it was solely a European problem. It ended in 1916 in Africa and 1918 in the whole world. What happened? Why was Africa a battleground? Why Africa having armed today? It's because the white man came and introduced the gun. Africa was fighting to support the Allied powers. By 1939, the Second World War broke out. It ended in 1945. Africa was still involved. Does it concern Africa? When the First World War broke out, it was purely a European problem. The immediate cause was the assassination of I.J. Franz Ferdinand and wife, Sofia at Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, by Bosnian students who were belonging to a second group called the Black Hand. But it was transported to Africa. How was that a concern of Africa?
This means probably, Doctor, that if we're about to end the show, probably if we were able to produce, to cultivate our own wheat and all those raw materials, we will not really need to be rushing to other countries to broker peace? Does that mean that even if Africa was in a very, very good position, they don't still have, they should not have that zeal to broker peace in other countries?
They will definitely do, because Africa in the next 10 years will see the emergence of new leaders who will be more Pan-Africanist, and these guys are going to lay more emphasis on agricultural production, and that will be mass and industrial production. It is very difficult for Africa now to think about technological emergence even in the next 15 years. It will be a bit so challenging to get there. But we can actually focus on what is easily and plausible. And that one is agricultural production. We have the climate, we have the soil, and we have the human resource to do that. So if we focus on that, we are going to turn the battle to be the bread basket of the world. Why they have that technology, we have the food. And so there will be easier win-win negotiation, rather than now that we are struggling to embrace technology when what we can easily produce, we are not yet producing. Because if you take, for example, the fact that some countries in Africa import wheat and rice when they have the capacity to produce it, it becomes worrisome, because Ukraine and Russia are found in temperate areas with a lot of climatic challenges. Yet they are able to do that through technological aspect. We need little technology to do that production, and we can do that. And as I'm saying, Africa should remain optimistic. We are optimistic, and we know that if we go to a certain agreement and focus on what we can do better with less constraint, we can then use that as a force, and then be able to bargain at the world market, to be able to bargain at international level, and to be able to force our own decisions down the throat of those who have technology.
Isidore Pacom, we have come to the end of the program. I want to thank you so much for coming to 90 Minutes in Africa.
It's a pleasure, and I would like to be there next time, maybe with a red cap.
Thank you. We wish you the best. Dr. Eyongta, I want to thank you so much for coming. Thank you too for your patience.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and we wish our doctor in the making the best and the fastest defense possible, the fastest time we can go. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. On that note, we draw the curtains for today's edition of 90 Minutes in Africa, produced by Romuald Gacha, supervised with the coordination of Kum Leonard, and supervised by Brian Tambe. I am Boh Elvis, thanking you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.